Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot, as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. The first warning was the hush. Not the gentle quiet of twilight, but a suffocating absence of sound that strangled the valley's usual chorus. Birds fell mute. Leaves hung still. Lyra, a whittled figure clutched in her hand, froze, every nerve alight. Her village, normally abuzz with life's comforting symphony, was eerily silenced. Then came the reek, a feral miasma riding the breeze, pungent enough to sear her sinuses. A jolt of pure, unadulterated fear slammed into her. That stench. Werewolf. She sprinted for her cottage, her pulse a frantic drum against her ribs. The scene awaiting her was a vortex of brutality. Bestial shapes rampaged through the settlement like a tempest, their guttural growls mingling with terrified screams. Neighbors, faces etched with horror, were ripped from their hearths. The air tasted of iron. Eamon was the first she spotted, his immense silhouette framed by the nascent flames consuming a nearby roof. He grappled with a villager, fangs exposed in a savage grimace. Further back, orchestrating the mayhem with chilling composure, stood Kalen. His imposing form radiated an almost regal authority, and a harsh severity hardened his features, rendering him nearly unrecognizable. His gaze snagged on hers, and a fleeting, indecipherable emotion, perhaps a shadow of remorse, perhaps something far more sinister flickered across his face before he looked away. Lyra didn't linger, didn't risk discovery. She weaved between dwellings, exploiting the deepening shadows as her allies. Escape was paramount. She needed answers. Why this slaughter? What transgression had warranted such carnage? Reaching the village's edge, the forest promised sanctuary. But as she slipped into the trees, Kalen's voice, magnified by his alpha's power, sliced through the bedlam. Lyra, bring her alive. Each word was a death knell. Cold and absolute, she fled, propelled by instinctual terror, the sounds of pursuit clawing at her heels. Branches lashed at her clothes, thorns raked her skin. Yet she didn't falter. These woods were her domain, every twist and turn etched in her memory. But she also knew the werewolves were faster, stronger, their senses honed to a razor's edge. She could hear their advance, their heavy strides thudding against the soil, their snarls closing the distance. She clambered up a steep bank of shale, hoping the dense thicket above would offer respite. But at the summit, he stood, Kalen, blocking her path. His eyes burned with a light that seemed to penetrate her very core. Lyra, he stated, his voice utterly devoid of feeling. It ends here. She stared, breath ragged and shallow. Why? She choked out. What have I done? His expression remained an impenetrable mask. You represent a threat, a danger to my pack's stability. But I've done nothing wrong. Her voice trembled, desperate. I don't understand any of this. Understanding is irrelevant. He advanced, and she recoiled. Your mere existence is sufficient justification. He raised his hand, and agony exploded within her. A searing, white-hot pain tore into her flesh. She screamed, collapsing, her vision dissolving into a hazy blur. She saw Kalen turn away, his face an enigma, and then oblivion swallowed her. Consciousness returned with a vengeance, a symphony of pain. Each breath was excruciating, each movement a fresh wave of torment. She lay in the undergrowth, the frigid earth biting into her cheek. The wound on her shoulder pulsed with infernal heat. She reached for it, her fingers encountering something coarse and unfamiliar. A brand. A sigil. She was marked. She struggled to sit up, but a dizzying wave crashed over her, forcing her back down. Weak, bleeding, and utterly alone. Silence gripped the forest, broken only by the susurrus of wind whispering through the canopy. She shut her eyes, and Kaelin's impassive face seared itself into her mind. He had tried to end her life. He had abandoned her to die, yet she clung to existence. And as the first tendrils of dawn sliced through the trees, painting the forest floor with long skeletal shadows, a flicker of something beyond pain sparked within her. It was a seed of defiance, a refusal to yield. She would endure. She would decipher this nightmare. And one day, they would all atone. She crawled toward a trickling stream, the icy water a shock to her ravaged system. She drank deeply, welcoming the numbing cold. As she cleansed the blood from her face, her reflection stared back, eyes once bright with innocence, now hardened with resolve. The brand on her shoulder served as a brutal reminder of the cataclysm, the betrayal. She tore a strip from her dress, binding the wound with clumsy, weakened hands. A temporary reprieve, but it would suffice. Shelter was crucial, healing imperative. Gathering her strength, she pushed herself upright, her legs trembling precariously. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the crisp morning air. She would not perish here. She would not grant them victory. She would survive, and she would extract her retribution. The thought surged through her, lending her the strength for the first step. She pivoted and ventured deeper into the woods, leaving behind the life she cherished, the village she called home. Alone, hunted, and branded, but alive. And, for the present, that was enough. Her odyssey had commenced. Sanctuary the forest floor, a chaotic tapestry of withered leaves and fractured wood pressed against Lyra's face. Each shallow inhale ignited a fresh agony in her ribs, a brutal reminder of Kaelin's power. The brand seared her shoulder, its throbbing a sinister echo of her own faltering pulse. She had to press on, outrun the haunting visions of incinerated homesteads and vacant stairs. An icy dread permeated her core, blurring the line between acute pain and encroaching oblivion. A stifled moan escaped her, lost to the whisper of leaves overhead. Desperate, she scrabbled at the soil, her vision closing in. Was this the end? Would her vow of vengeance dissolve here, within the very woods she'd pledged to safeguard? Then, a sound cut through the sylvan hush. Not the brittle snap of twigs beneath her own weight, but something lighter, more intentional. Footfalls. A tentative hope, like a fledgling taking wing, stirred within her. Or was it merely the chilling premonition of werewolves returning to finish what they started? Her ravaged body refused to comply with her will, each limb leaden and unresponsive. A shadow eclipsed the meager sunlight, falling across her face. A woman knelt beside her, concern etched deep into her features. Raven hair framed a countenance both resolute and gentle. "Briar," the woman murmured, her tone urgent. "Quickly! She's clinging to life! Briar!" The name brushed against her consciousness like a phantom breeze. Lyra struggled to focus, to decipher the woman's features, but encroaching darkness threatened to swallow her whole. Dimly, she registered the tender hands that cradled her, the soothing cadence of voices. Then, oblivion. She stirred to the evocative blend of herbal infusions and warm beeswax. The air, a comforting balm, stood in stark contrast to the forest's frigid embrace. Her body ached, heavy and protesting, but the sharp, Relentless agony had dulled to a manageable pulse. Light, filtered softly through a stained glass window, greeted her as she blinked awake. The room was a sanctuary of circular design, its walls lined with shelves laden with dried flora and peculiar relics. Woven tapestries, depicting spiraling nebulae and archaic symbols, draped the stone walls, imbuing the space with an aura of arcane potency. Beside the bed sat Morwen, her moss-agate eyes brimming with both compassion and unwavering resolve. "Welcome back, Lyra," she greeted, her voice a soothing balm. "You've been asleep for 3 days." Lyra attempted to rise, but a dizzying wave threatened to overwhelm her. Gently, Morwen guided her back against the pillows. "Easy now. You're still weakened from blood loss." Where am I?" Lyra rasped, her throat as rough as parchment. "You're in Sanctuary," Morwen answered. "A place of healing, of learning, a place of safety." Lyra frowned, wrestling with fragmented memories. The assault Kaelin, the Brando the recollections crashed in, a torrent of terror and rage. She reached for her shoulder, her fingers tracing the jagged outline of the mark. He did this," she whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. Morwen's expression hardened. "We know. Briar discovered you just outside the coven's wards, barely alive." A woman with a fiery mane and a stern countenance strode into the chamber. "Briar," her gaze, sharp and assessing, lingered on Lyra's brand. "She doesn't belong here, Morwen," Briar declared, her voice laced with suspicion. "She's mocked. They're connected." "Briar," Morwen countered, her voice unwavering. "Lyra is under our protection. She is injured and requires aid." "Aid?" Briar scoffed, scorn evident in her voice. "Or a liability? That market's a beacon, Morwen. It will draw them to us." A younger woman, her eyes radiating warmth and optimism, entered carrying a steaming mug. "Briar, please," she pleaded softly. "Can't you see she's suffering?" Sage placed the mug on the bedside table. "Here, Lyra, drink this. It will help ease the pain." Lyra looked at Sage, gratitude welling in her heart. "Thank you," she managed, taking a cautious sip. The liquid was a warming elixir of sweetness and subtle earthiness. It soothed her raw throat and calmed her pounding heart. Morwen shifted her attention back to Lyra. "You have questions, I know, and we will answer them. But first, you must rest. You are safe here, Lyra. We will permit no harm to befall you." Safe. The word reverberated in Lyra's mind, a foreign concept after the recent horrors. Could she genuinely place her trust in these witches, these enigmas of magic? What was their stake in her survival? As if attuned to her inner turmoil, Morwen stated, "We know of your lineage, Lyra, of your mother." Lyra's breath hitched. Her mother. A forbidden topic, whispered about in hushed tones within her village. A woman cloaked in half-truths and veiled secrets. My mother? She was one of us, Morwen revealed, her eyes tinged with a blend of sorrow and reverence. A potent witch, descended from a lineage of healers and seers. Lyra stared at Morwen, stunned into silence. I didn't know. My father never spoke of her." "He was safeguarding you," Morwen clarified. "From the wolves, from the prophecy." "The prophecy." The word resonated with a weighty dread. "What prophecy?" Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Morwen sighed, her gaze drifting into the distance. "An ancient prediction, foretelling the arrival of a child born of disparate worlds. A child destined to either secure the werewolf packs or obliterate them completely. A shiver traced Lyra's spine. And that child is me. Morwen nodded, her expression grave. The prophecy dictates that you, Lyra, are the linchpin. Your choices will shape the destiny of the werewolves, and perhaps our own. Briar scoffed, her arms crossed. See? I told you. She's nothing but a source of trouble. Morwen silenced Briar with a single, authoritative glance. Turning back to Lyra, she offered compassion. This isn't a burden you asked for, Lyra, but it's one you must carry. Kalen marked you not merely as a threat, but as a participant in this ancient struggle. He believes he can manipulate the outcome by eliminating you. But he underestimates your fortitude, your resilience. But I don't understand, Lyra stammered, her thoughts reeling. I'm just a hunter. I understand neither magic nor prophecy. You possess more latent power than you realize, Lyra, Morwen assured. Your mother's blood courses strongly within you. We can guide you to unlock it, to master it, to ascend into the woman you are fated to become. Lyra surveyed Morwen, Briar, Sage. 3 distinct women, bound by a common cause. They extended sanctuary, knowledge, and the chance to decipher the forces that had shattered her world. But could she truly trust them? And more critically, could she trust herself? The prophecy loomed, an oppressive shadow threatening to engulf her. Was she a harbinger of salvation or devastation? Could she, branded and hunted, carve her own path amidst such overwhelming odds? These questions churned within her, a tempest of fear and uncertainty. Yet, beneath the fear, a fragile ember of hope flickered, a spark of defiance. She would not be a mere pawn in this archaic conflict. She would not allow Kalen to define her. She would learn, she would evolve, and she would chart her own course. Whether it culminated in salvation or ruin, the choice would be hers, and hers alone. Awakening prismatic shards of light, fractured by the training room's stained glass window, splashed across the flagstones. Lyra stood within this spectrum, Sage's steadying hand a comforting presence at her back. Let it flow, Lyra, Sage encouraged, her voice a soothing melody. The potential resides within. Yearning for release. Imagine a river, its constant motion, its resilience, never truly broken, only ever-changing. Lyra obeyed, conjuring the image of the waterway near her childhood home, sunlight shimmering on its surface. She strived for that same adaptability, that quiet fortitude. Instead, a maelstrom brewed within, a turbulent chaos of apprehension and fury. "I can't," she choked out, frustration stinging. A shiver racked her, and the very air around her vibrated with untamed energy. The colorful light fractured further, then succumbed to a creeping gloom as frost veiled the stained glass. "Easy now," Sage cautioned, her tone retaining its calm, though sharpened with concern. "Center yourself. Don't resist. Channel it." But the memories surged, relentless and vivid. Kalen's enraged visage, the branded scars' lingering burn, the impassive gaze of the wolves as they seized her. They overwhelmed her thoughts, silencing Sage's guidance, stifling the nascent magic she sought to command. A stifled cry escaped her, and the room's temperature plummeted alarmingly. Hoarfrost blossomed on the stone walls, intricate patterns spreading like skeletal fingers. Sage recoiled, unease flickering in her eyes. "Lyra, you're losing your grip," she warned. Abruptly, She was transported back to that forest clearing. The scent of damp earth and evergreen needles assaulted her senses. The metallic tang of blood filled her mouth. Kalen's pronouncement, "A death now! You are anathema. You will not survive to threaten my pack." Each syllable echoed in her mind. A raw, reopened wound. She recoiled, clutching herself as if deflecting physical blows. A sob tore through her, and the frost on the walls thickened, reaching towards the ceiling like frozen vines. The atmosphere grew dense, suffocating. "Enough!" Morwen's voice sliced through the turmoil, a beacon of command. The chill lifted abruptly. The frost retreated, leaving only a sheen of moisture on the cold stone. Lyra gasped, her chest rising and falling raggedly, her body trembling uncontrollably. She opened her eyes, tears coursing down her cheeks. Morwen stood before Pran, her expression severe yet laced with understanding. "This is not the path, Lyra," Morwen stated, her voice both firm and gentle. "You cannot permit your pain to swallow you whole. Your capability isn't a tool of decimation. It is a gift intrinsic to your being. You must master it, control it, or it will be your undoing." Lyra lowered her head, consumed by shame. "I'm unable," she confessed. "It's too much to control." "It's all simply too much." Morwen approached, gently tilting Lyra's chin upward, meeting her gaze. "You possess more strength than you realize, Lyra," she declared, her eyes probing. "You carry the lineage of a potent sorceress, a bloodline, dormant for generations. You are pivotal to the prophecy, the deciding factor in the fate of the werewolf packs. This power is your inheritance. Embrace it." "But I reject it," Lyra cried, her voice cracking. "I did not seek this. I yearned for an ordinary existence." "Ordinary?" A melancholic smile played on Morwen's lips. "That is no longer an option for you, Lyra." Kalen ensured that. "But you retain a choice. Either permit his cruelty to define you, allowing your resentment and fear to consume you, or rise above it. You can wield this power to defend yourself, to safeguard others. You can sculpt your own destiny." Lyra searched Morwen's eyes, seeking guidance. She saw not just force, but also empathy, compassion, and an unwavering resilience. A strength Lyra desperately coveted. "Teach me," she pleaded, her voice barely audible. "How am I to do so?" Morwen squeezed her hand. "We will instruct you," she avowed. "Sage will guide you, and I will offer mentorship. But ultimately, the onus is on you. You must determine the kind of witch you wish to become, a harbinger of annihilation or a source of hope." Briar lingered in the shadows, arms folded, her expression inscrutable. "Hope is perilous," she muttered, her voice tinged with cynicism, especially when intertwined with one marked by an alpha's malice. Morwen pivoted, her eyes flashing with irritation. "Enough, Briar. Lyra is under our protection. She will be treated with respect." Briar simply shrugged, her gaze unwavering. "I merely voice what others think. She's a liability, a walking mark. How long before Kalen seeks her out?" "We will prepare," Morwen stated, her voice like tempered steel. "We will shield her, and we will facilitate the awakening of her full potential. Lyra is no damsel, Briar. She is a survivor, and she is destined for significance." Lyra glanced from Morwen to Briar, feeling the weight of their opposing views. She understood that Briar's skepticism stemmed from fear, a fear that resonated within herself. Yet, she also witnessed the unwavering conviction in Morwen's gaze, a faith that kindled a spark of optimism within her, an inkling that perhaps, just perhaps, she could endure this. Perhaps she could even evolve into something greater. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting long shadows across the coven's grounds, Lyra gravitated towards the small herb garden nestled near the main house's rear. The air hung heavy with the fragrance of lavender and rosemary, a soothing balm to her frazzled nerves. She knelt by a patch of chamomile, gently caressing the delicate petals. Sage discovered her there, a small basket in hand. "Troubled sleep?" she inquired, her voice gentle. Lyra nodded, abashed. "The nightmares. They will recede," Sage assured, her voice reassuring. "In time." She offered Lyra a handful of dried chamomile blossoms. "Brew some tea. It will aid in calming your thoughts." Lyra accepted the flowers, inhaling their delicate scent. "Gratitude," she murmured. Sage settled beside her, her presence a silent reassurance. "It is no simple feat," she said, after a moment of quiet. "What you are enduring, but solitude is not your burden. Support abounds." Lyra looked at Sage, her heart swelling with thankfulness. "I cannot fathom why you aid me," she confessed. "I am but a stranger, and Briar's assessment rings true. I present a risk." Sage smiled gently. "We extend aid to those in need," she explained. "It defines our purpose. Moreover," she added, her eyes twinkling, "I sense something remarkable within you, Lyra. A nascent flame, awaiting ignition. And I, for one, eagerly anticipate witnessing its cod. Manifestation." Lyra glanced down at the chamomile blossoms cupped in her hand, a faint smile gracing her lips. Perhaps, just perhaps, she might discover the path to forgiveness toward Kaelin. Maybe she could channel her abilities for the greater good. Conceivably, she could even forge a future, not only for herself, but for all. But paramount, she must quell the tempest within. She had to learn to awaken. Shadows of the past years bled into each other, marked only by the deepening etch of frost on the training grounds and the sharpening glint in Lyra's eyes. The girl who once trembled at the sight of her own power was gone, replaced by a woman who wielded ice like a weapon, each shard a memory of betrayal, each gust a promise of retribution. Briar, her initial skepticism hardening into a reluctant respect, pushed Lyra relentlessly. Again, she'd bark, her voice raspy with impatience, channel the rage, not the fear. "Fear will shatter you, rage will make you unbreakable." The training was brutal, a dance of near misses and controlled explosions. Briar, ever the pragmatist, focused on practical applications, shielding, offensive strikes, the art of freezing a foe solid in the blink of an eye. Lyra excelled, her magic no longer a wild, untamed force, but a honed instrument of destruction. Yet, beneath the surface of controlled power, the burning embers of vengeance still glowed. Late one night, after a particularly grueling session, Lyra found herself drawn to Caspian's tower. The air around it shimmered with an ancient energy, a palpable sense of timelessness. He was always there, it seemed, waiting, watching. He never offered advice unless asked, and even then his words were riddles wrapped in silence. "Caspian," she said, her voice echoing in the stillness. "The prophecy they say I am destined to either save them or destroy them. Which is it?" He turned, His eyes, the color of twilight, seemed to hold the weight of centuries. Destiny is not a fixed path, Lyra. It is a river, constantly shifting, influenced by every choice, every ripple. The prophecy speaks of potential, not certainty. The power to destroy and the power to heal often stem from the same source. But Kalen, he tried to kill me. He believed the prophecy meant I was a threat. Her voice cracked with a pain that time hadn't fully healed. Caspian's gaze softened, ever so slightly. He acted out of fear, Lyra. Fear is a potent weapon, easily manipulated. But fear can also be overcome. The question is, will you allow his fear to dictate your choices? Lyra stared out at the moonlit forest, the shadows stretching like grasping claws. I want him to suffer. I want him to feel the pain I felt. The fear, the betrayal, the vengeance is a fleeting satisfaction, Lyra. It consumes the one who seeks it, leaving only ashes in its wake. Is that truly what you desire? She didn't answer, the silence hanging heavy between them. Caspian's words were a mirror, reflecting the darkness she had tried so hard to ignore. The desire for revenge was a burning coal in her chest, keeping her warm, fueling her training. But was it also blinding her? Walking back to her secluded cottage, Lyra replayed the events of that fateful night. Kalen, his face contorted with fury, the cold steel of the dagger pressed against her throat. She remembered the searing pain, the feeling of her lifeblood draining away, the crushing weight of betrayal. But she also remembered the pack, the innocent lives that would be caught in the crossfire of her vengeance. They were wolves, yes, but they were also mothers, fathers, children. Sage was waiting for her, a warm cup of herbal tea in her hands. He was a constant source of comfort, a grounding presence in her turbulent life. He didn't push, didn't judge, simply offered a listening ear and a gentle smile. Troubled? He asked, his voice soft. Lyra accepted the tea, the warmth spreading through her chilled hands. Caspian. He says vengeance is not the answer. Sage nodded slowly. He speaks with wisdom, Lyra, but the path to forgiveness is not always easy. You have suffered greatly. It is natural to feel anger, to want justice. But is justice worth the cost? She whispered, the question hanging in the air. Sage placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm and reassuring. That is a question only you can answer, Lyra. Follow your heart, listen to your conscience, and remember you are not alone. Later that night, sleep evaded her. She tossed and turned, haunted by fragmented memories. Kalen's face twisted in rage, then a small wolf pup, its eyes wide with innocent curiosity, playing in the forest. The prophecy, a dark cloud hanging over her destiny. She rose, drawn by an invisible force, and walked out into the night. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, the hooting of owls, the distant howl of wolves. She closed her eyes, focusing on the energy that flowed through her veins, the magic that was both a gift and a curse. She reached out, her hand outstretched, and summoned a shard of ice. It shimmered in the moonlight, reflecting her conflicted emotions. She could use it to destroy, to inflict pain, to exact her revenge. Or she could use it to protect, to heal, to build a better future. The choice was hers. The weight of the prophecy pressed down on her, but she refused to be defined by it. She would forge her own destiny, carve her own path, even if it meant facing the man who had tried to kill her. even if it meant forgiving him. The night air grew colder as Lyra made her decision. The frost on the trees seemed to deepen, responding to her resolve. Forgiveness wouldn't be easy, but vengeance would only perpetuate the cycle of hatred. She would save his pack, not for him, but for them. And perhaps, in doing so, she could finally save herself. The crimson rot Kaelin gagged against the coppery reek that saturated the air. It coated his palate, a persistent metallic reminder of everything lost. The cloying sweetness of putrescence had usurped the familiar, comforting sense of pine and soil. Before him lay a ghastly parody of their training grounds, a makeshift infirmary where his werewolves, once paragons of strength, now languished, broken. The crimson rot, a virulent plague transforming blood to venom, skin to suppurating wounds. It began insidiously a low fever, a hacking cough before erupting into that telltale rash, a scarlet tide consuming them from within. He knelt by a young pup, barely shifted, her breath a wet rattle in her chest. Isla. Mischief usually danced in those bright, curious eyes, now clouded with agony. Gently, he smoothed a tangled lock from her brow. "How are you feeling, little wolf?" he managed, his voice a gravelly rasp. A painful liquid cough answered. "Better," she breathed, barely audible. "Bram said you were coming." A ghost of a smile touched Kaelin's lips. Bram. His second. His anchor. He'd charged him with holding the pack together while he battled his own festering culpability. "Bram sees all," he replied, feigning a likeness he couldn't muster. "He is the heart of this pack." He squeezed her tiny hand, feeling the delicate bones beneath his. "Rest now. Grow strong. We need your spirit." Rising, his joints creaked in protest. The sheer volume of suffering weighed on him, an invisible hand pressing him toward the earth. He drifted through the ward, a specter amongst the dying. Every cough, every moan, was a shard of glass twisting in his core. He was responsible. This was his failing. Protection had been his vow. Bram found him near the perimeter, worry carved into the lines of his face. Exhaustion etched deeper furrows there, a visible burden sagging his shoulders. "Kaelin," he said, his tone somber. "We need to talk." Kaelin turned, meeting Bram's gaze. He saw the truth mirrored there, the desperation clawing at hope, the encroaching shadow of despair. "What is it?" Bram hesitated, choosing each syllable with care. "The statistics they're accelerating. 5 more succumbed last night. The healers are depleted of essential herbs, the hunters too weakened to secure sufficient game. Rations are in effect, but the reserves are dwindling fast." Kaelin closed his eyes, the unseen weight threatening to suffocate him. He knew this, of course, witnessed it firsthand daily, but hearing the stark pronouncement, the unvarnished truth of their predicament, was like a physical blow. "How much time?" His voice was devoid of inflection. Bran shook his head, defeated. "A week, perhaps 2, with careful management. After that, oblivion." Silence descended, a palpable blanket of dread. Kaelin's gaze swept over the blighted landscape, the once thriving forest now reflecting the internal decay of his pack. The trees seemed to weep, their leaves stained with the same sickly crimson stain as the rot itself. "There's something else," Bram began, his voice hesitant. Kaelin's heart plummeted. "What is it now?" Amen, Bram stated, jaw tight. "He proposes abandoning the afflicted, fleeing with those still healthy." Kaelin's fist clenched instinctively. Amen. A. Lout. forever craving conflict, forever choosing the path of least resistance. He should have anticipated it. And your response? I forbade it, Bram said, resolve hardening his voice. This pack remains unified. We battle as one. We fall as one. A wave of profound gratitude washed over Kaelin. Bram was the linchpin holding them intact. Thank you, Bram, he managed, emotion clogging his throat. Thank you for providing the leadership I can't seem to find right now. Bram softened his gaze. You're still our alpha, Kaelin. Belief in you remains. You simply need to discover a resolution. Kaelin studied the infirmary, the ravaged faces of his pack etched in his memory. He knew the burden he had to shoulder, a course of action long dreaded, a path he'd sworn never to tread, but options had evaporated. Desperation reigned. There exists a slender hope, he whispered, barely audible. A solitary chance, fraught with risk. Bram's eyebrow arched, a silent query. What is it? Kaelin inhaled deeply, the metallic taint assaulting his senses. He forced himself to meet Bram's unwavering gaze. We must seek assistance. Assistance? From whom? Bram asked, bewildered. From the witches. Kaelin articulated, the words leaving a bitter residue. From her. Bram stared, incredulous. You cannot be serious. The witches? After all that's transpired? After what age? You perpetrated? Kaelin visibly recoiled, the recollection of his betrayal a searing brand. Lyra's face swam into focus. Young, haunted, forsaken. He had judged her without hesitation, driven by fear and unquestioning adherence to the prophecy. And now he contemplated begging for her intervention, the irony twisted like a corrosive acid. I realize the magnitude of this request, he rasped. But we are bereft of choice. Failure to act ensures their demise. Bram studied him, his expression a complex blend of disbelief and grudging comprehension. He understood Kaelin. He knew the weight of this choice. The survival of the pack, though, held paramount sway. And Yue genuinely believe she will extend aid? Bram inquired, skepticism laced throughout. After your treatment of her. Kaelin shook his head, the movement heavy with sorrow. I cannot guarantee it, he confessed. But I must attempt it. I must plead. I must exhaust every possibility to safeguard them. His gaze drifted back to the ward, to the failing members of his family. I owe them no less. He met Bram's eyes once more, pleading for understanding. Will you accompany me? Bram hesitated, the internal conflict etched on his brow. Fealty to Kaelin clashed with his reservations. Yet, ultimately, allegiance to the pack prevailed. He nodded, jaw clenched. Yes, he conceded. I will go with you. However, Kaelin, prepare yourself. This will be far from easy. Kaelin nodded, his heart a leaden weight laced with a thread of frantic hope. Confronting Lyra would constitute the most arduous challenge he had ever encountered, but he stood ready to face her fury, her resentment, anything for the sake of his pack. He had committed a grievous wrong, and now he must atone. He must beseech forgiveness from the very individual he had sought to destroy. The fate of his pack, and perhaps his own redemption, hung precariously in the balance. A wolf at the door, the reek assaulted them well before the protective wards materialized. An oversweet decay that coated Kaelin's palate with bile. Bram choked, hoisting his muffler higher, but Kaelin reveled in it. He deserved to imbibe this miasma, to let it infiltrate his very marrow. Here was the olfactory signature of his failing, the stench of a pack hemorrhaging strength. Trees gave way to reveal the border, an almost invisible screen of vibrant energy, thrumming like a plucked nerve. Kalen halted, his fingers brushing the pommel of his sword, a gesture more of trepidation than aggression. Humiliation stung. He, an alpha, reduced to begging at the door of a coven. A nadir he never envisioned. "Are you certain, Kalen?" Bram murmured, his tone laced with disquiet. "Surely there is another recourse." Kalen's jaw hardened. "There is none that will staunch the flow of death." He met Bram's gaze, seeking strength from his most steadfast, most trusted. "I know the burden I place on you is heavy." Bram's gaze was unflinching. "The true burden is watching our people succumb, Kalen. I stand with you. Whatever your choice." Kalen nodded, drawing resolve from Bram's loyalty, and strode across the threshold. The air sizzled, an electric caress that tested his resolve. He offered no resistance, letting its power probe. He was here for parley, not battle. The clearing unfolded, revealing the heart of the coven's domain. The reality defied his expectations. Absent were Gothic spires or steaming vats. Instead, humble dwellings clustered beneath the boughs of hoary trees, wisps of smoke spiraling from chimneys. It was deceptively idyllic, a stark contrast to the turmoil gripping his own lands. As he advanced, a figure emerged from the largest dwelling. Morwen. Her authority resonated even from afar. Her silver hair was bound tight, and her stormy eyes impaled him. "Kalen," she announced, her voice carrying on the breeze, crisp and cold. "You encroach." He swallowed, suppressing his pride. "I acknowledge that, Morwen, but I seek succor." She arched a skeptical brow. "Succor? From the witches you've spurned for generations past?" "My pack suffers," he declared, his voice roughened. "The crimson rot. It spreads with alarming speed, and our healers are impotent." He paused, the words catching. "I have come to plead for your intervention." Morwen's silence stretched, her gaze unrelenting. He sensed Bram's unease, but remained resolute, meeting her scrutiny head-on. He would not yield. His pack deserved his defiance of pride. "The crimson rot is born of dark craft," Morwen observed, her tone softening, yet no less potent. "It does not blossom spontaneously. Someone has wielded it as a weapon." Kalen winced, the accusation hitting its mark. Amon's ambitions, his ravenous thirst for power. He quelled the thought. Now was not the time for blame. "I am aware," he conceded. "But that is immaterial now. What matters is salvation for my people." "And why, Kalen, should we offer aid?" Morwen probed, steel edging her voice. "You've shown us only animosity. Why risk our own well-being for the sake of your pack?" He locked eyes with her, desperation his only shield. "Because lives hang in the balance," he rasped. "Innocence. Women. Children. They should not perish for the sins of their alpha." He loathed the tremor in his voice, the supplication that rasped against his throat, but pride was a luxury he could ill afford. Morwen subjected him to a protracted scrutiny, her expression unreadable. He felt the weight of her judgment, the condemnation in her stillness. It felt like an eternity before her pronouncement. "I will entertain your petition, Kalen," she stated. "The decision rests not with me alone." Hope flickered, fragile as spun glass. "Thank you," he croaked. "That is all I require." Morwen's gaze sharpened. "But heed this, Kalen," she warned, her voice low and precise. "Should we elect to assist you, it will exact a price." "A considerable one." He steeled himself. He had anticipated as much. "Name it," he commanded, his voice firm. Whatever the cost, I will meet it. Morwen's smile was slow, knowing, and sent a cold cascade down his spine. "Oh, I shall, Kalen," she assured him. "I assure you I shall." A dramatic pause, her eyes gleaming with unsettling fervor. "But the debt is not yours to settle." She turned, gliding towards the cottage, leaving Kalen alone in the clearing, the gravity of her words a crushing weight. He watched her departure, a knot of apprehension constricting his gut. What forfeiture could outweigh his very existence? And who would be made to pay? A palpable tension gripped the coven hall, the earthy aroma of pine and loam failing to conceal the sharp, metallic scent of Kalen's trepidation. He stood ramrod straight, eyes trained on Morwen. The Lyra knew he registered her presence with a deeper awareness. Morwen's words lingered, a veiled offer of salvation burdened by a disquieting cost. The unsaid pressed down like a suffocating blanket. Then, Morwen's voice, smooth as spun silk yet edged with authority, sliced through the silence. "Alpha Kalen, it is time you met the arbiter of your destiny." With a subtle gesture, Morwen revealed Lyra. A collective intake of breath swept the chamber. But Lyra's focus remained laser-locked on Kalen. The years had sculpted her face, each line a testament to past anguish, now forming a mask of steely composure. The girl he'd condemned had vanished, reborn as a woman, emanating a quiet, formidable strength. She returned his stare without flinching. Not a trace of weakness betrayed her. Kalen's visage, already drawn from worry and the creeping blight, bleached further. A strangled gasp escaped him. Swallowed by the sudden hush, recognition blossomed, a slow, excruciating dawn that shattered his carefully constructed facade. This man, the once haughty alpha who'd sentenced her to death with callous ease, now stood exposed. Stripped raw by desperation and burgeoning dread, he groped for words, his mouth working soundlessly. "Lyra?" He finally choked out, the name a fractured plea. Lyra offered a curt nod, glacial in its acknowledgement. "You recall." The words, soft as a caress, carried the accumulated weight of years of suffering and simmering fury. She witnessed a fleeting glimpse of guilt flicker in his gaze, swiftly masked by a desperate supplication. "I presumed he stammered, the sentence unfinished. He had thought her dead. He had desired her demise. The realization hung between them, a suffocating truth. "You thought you'd erased me," Lyra completed, her tone hardening to flint. "You were mistaken." She advanced, the scent of healing herbs and ozone clinging to her like a shroud, a stark contrast to the primal, earthy musk radiating from Kalen. She saw the tremor in his outstretched hands, the deep furrows of fatigue carved around his eyes. The crimson rot was exacting its price. Morwen observed them, her expression an inscrutable mask. The other coven members remained mute, their eyes oscillating. Between Lyra and Kalen, sensing the volatile energy that now permeated the room, the atmosphere thrummed with anticipation, a silent maelstrom gaining force. Kalen's glance darted to Morwen, a silent entreaty for intervention. But the coven leader remained stone-faced. He was isolated, confronted with the ramifications of his choices. He pivoted back to Lyra, his eyes now pleading. "My pack, they are succumbing." "And you seek me out?" Irony dripped from Lyra's tone. "The one you tried to extinguish?" "I erred," Kalen confessed, his voice thick with remorse. "I was misguided. By the Elder Council, by the premonition." He swallowed with difficulty, the admission a bitter draught. "The premonition," Lyra echoed. the word a frozen dagger. The premonition that had haunted her existence, that had branded her an outcast, that had led him to condemn her. "Enlighten me regarding this premonition, Kaelin," he demurred, his eyes flitting around the hall as if seeking a means of escape. Yet there was none. He was ensnared, entangled in the consequences of his own making. It spoke of a sorceress, born beneath a crimson moon, destined to bring devastation to our lineage, a herald of tumult and destruction. Lyra emitted a harsh, clipped laugh that echoed across the room. "And you gave credence to this? You sentenced me based on a mere fable?" "I was immature," Kaelin entreated. "I was in terror. The elders, they manipulated me." "Evasions," Lyra spat, her simmering fury now erupting. "Excuses are all I hear." She closed the distance, invading his personal space, her gaze burning into his very soul. "You possessed agency, Kaelin. You always possessed agency." She recalled the glacial steel of the blade against her jugular, the Alpha's face, devoid of all compassion. He recoiled, the memory evidently as vivid for him as it was for her. "I am aware," he rasped. "I am cognizant of my failure toward you." Lyra circled him deliberately, like a predator sizing up its quarry. "Failed me? You consigned me to death. You pilfered my existence, my kin, my destiny." She halted before him, her voice dropping to a dangerous murmur. "Now, you arrive pleading for my deliverance. You expect me to safeguard the pack you sought to shield by terminating me." Kaelin lowered his head, unable to sustain her gaze. "I am undeserving of your benevolence." "Indeed," Lyra affirmed, her tone frigid. "You are not." She paused, allowing the silence to resonate between them. The weight of his culpability, the desperation of his predicament, the dominion she now wielded over him, she savored it all. It was a moment she had envisioned for years, a moment of reckoning. Yet, even as she relished the gratification of his suffering, a flicker of something else stirred within her. A germ of uncertainty, a whisper of compassion. She regarded his ravaged features, the terror etched in his eyes, and saw not just the Alpha who had wronged her, but a leader desperate to safeguard his people. The premonition, she discerned, was not solely about her. It was about him as well, about the decisions he made, the path he chose to tread. Lyra straightened her spine, suppressing the conflicting emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Vengeance would be gratifying, but ultimately hollow. It would not resurrect what she had forfeited, nor would it reshape the future. She now possessed an opportunity to accomplish something greater, to shatter the cycle of animosity and brutality that had plagued both her existence and his pack for generations. "I will offer assistance," Lyra declared, her voice clear and unwavering. Kaelin's head shot up, his eyes widening with disbelief. You will, but not gratis," Lyra continued, her gaze hardening once more. "The debt to which Morwen alluded it shall be settled. Anything." Kaelin croaked, his voice hoarse with desperation. "I will consent to anything." "You shall," Lyra agreed. "You will impart to me all that you comprehend regarding the premonition. Every nuance, every rendition, every hushed secret. You will lay bare your mind to me, and permit me to perceive the truth." Kaelin hesitated, a cloud of suspicion veiling his eyes. "Why? What is your purpose with the premonition?" "I desire to comprehend it," Lyra asserted, her voice low and intense. I desire to ascertain why it condemned me, why it impelled you to attempt my demise, and I wish to discern how to dismantle it." "Dismantle it?" Kalen echoed, his voice laced with apprehension. "That is impossible. The premonition is immutable. It is fate." "I hold no belief in fate," Lyra countered, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I believe in agency, and I elect to reshape the future." She advanced, her voice dropping to a hushed murmur. "Aid me in deciphering this premonition, Kalen, and I shall deliver your pack. Refuse, and I shall witness their demise." The ultimatum hung suspended in the air, stark and inescapable. Kalen stared at Lyra, his face a mask of internal conflict. He perceived the power in her eyes, the unwavering resolve in her stance, and knew that she was not issuing an empty threat. She held his pack's very existence within her grasp. He swallowed hard, the weight of his decision crushing him. "Very well," he conceded, his voice barely audible. "I shall tell you all." The silence pressed down, a suffocating blanket more oppressive than the reek of decay clinging to Kalen's fur. A subtle shift sent shards of agony lancing through his bones, a constant reminder of the affliction gnawing at him and his kin. Bram stood sentinel-like, his face a stoic mask of concern etched in sharp relief. Lyra remained statue still, eyes unwavering since his desperate entreaty. Outside the wind shrieked, an echo of the tempest raging within him. "Tell me," Lyra finally breathed, her voice a dry rasp that scraped against the tense air. "Everything about this aforesight. Unburden yourself of the details you withheld before." Kalen's eyelids drifted shut, the memory emblazoned on his mind. The prophecy. For generations it had been their pack's foundation and haunting specter, a lineage of apprehension passed from alpha to alpha. "It began with my grandsire," he rasped, his voice catching in his throat. "A seer, though we shunned the designation. He glimpsed a corruption creeping into our bloodline, a blight that would fester and undo us from within." He paused, swallowing thickly. Lyra's gaze felt like a physical weight, compelling truth. "He envisioned a woman," Kalen continued, "born of witch's lineage, yet marked by the wolf. Her power, he claimed, would be anomalous, that she held the fulcrum of our salvation, or utter ruin, and which fate a dead day." "You embrace?" Lyra inquired, her tone soft with menace. Kalen opened his eyes, meeting her piercing stare. He found no compassion, only a frigid, assessing intellect. "I was green," he confessed, the words like gravel in his mouth. "Terrified. My father had just perished, thrusting me into the Alpha's role before I was ready. The elders they were resolute. They branded you as the threat, the encroaching darkness." He recalled the faces, etched with dread, the hushed warnings, the pressure to safeguard his pack at any cost. He'd been a pawn then, dancing to the dirge of their fears. "They foretold," Kalen continued, his voice barely audible, "that her eyes would mirror the coming cataclysm, her touch would usher in the frost, and her heart would be a sealed keep, guarding deliverance or annihilation." Bram stirred behind him, a guttural rumble vibrating in his chest. He sensed the impending revelation, the scale of Kalen's disgrace. "And what repercussions did they envision if this woman were allowed to thrive?" Lyra pressed, relentless. "They proclaimed the crimson rot would descend," Kalen replied, the words leaden with foreboding. "That it would consume us all, turning our very essence against us. Our strength would become our vulnerability, our fealty, our downfall." A cough racked his frame, a harsh percussion in the tense stillness. "The crimson rot was no longer mere conjecture. It was a tangible terror. Lyra advanced, her eyes narrowed to slits. "So, on the basis of a fable, you condemned me," she declared, her voice dripping with disdain. "A fireside story spun by fearful elders." "It was more than that," Kalen retorted, instantly regretting his vehemence. He modulated his voice, compelling himself to maintain equilibrium. "It was our heritage, our faith. It was the sum of our understanding." "Understanding?" Lyra scoffed. "Or blind adherence? Did you ever question it, Kalen? Did it ever occur to you that perhaps, just perhaps, the prophecy might be flawed?" He averted his gaze, unable to bear her scrutiny. The truth tasted like poison on his tongue. He had been so consumed by dread, so intent on protecting his pack, that he had neglected to ponder, to challenge, to truly perceive the woman standing before him. "I erred," he conceded, a bitter admission of culpability. "I see it now. I was a craven. I allowed fear to steer my actions." "And now you come supplicating?" Lyra said, her voice devoid of inflection. "Crawling back to the witch you sought to destroy, hoping she'll remedy your failings." He winced at the indictment, but he could not refute it. "I am aware that I am unworthy of your assistance," he admitted, his voice raw with desperation. "But my pack, they deserve reprieve. They are guiltless. They are languishing." Lyra remained mute, her countenance inscrutable. He felt the weight of her judgment, the accumulated years of anguish and perfidy simmering beneath the surface. He wondered if she could ever truly absolve him. "What is your desire?" Kalen implored, his voice a mere exhalation. "What price must be paid to redeem them?" Lyra finally stirred, turning away from him to confront the storm brewing outside. "I demand the truth," she stated, her voice resonating in the sudden quiet. "The unvarnished truth. I demand to know the full extent of the prophecy, the origins of the hostilities between our lineages. I demand to know why you were so swift to denounce me, so willing to embrace the worst presumptions." She pivoted back, her eyes blazing with a fervor that sent a shiver down his spine despite the fever coursing through his veins. "And I require your absolute and unwavering cooperation. No deceptions, no partial truths, no concealed motives. I require you to cast aside your pride, your apprehension, everything that led you to that cursed clearing all those years prior. Can you accomplish that, Kalen? Can you genuinely relinquish the past and entrust me with the salvation of your pack?" He looked at her, truly observed her, for the first time. He discerned the fortitude in her gaze, the resolve in her jawline, the power that emanated from her like a palpable force. He also saw the anguish, the scars of treachery that would never fully disappear. He knew that this was his sole recourse, his pack's singular opportunity. He had to quell his pride, confront his past, and place his trust in the woman he had once sought to obliterate. "Yes," Kalen affirmed, his voice unwavering despite the tremor in his hands. "I will do whatever is asked. I will disclose everything. I will cooperate fully. Just spare them." Lyra nodded slowly, her expression still cautious. "Then a pact is forged," she responded. "But understand this, Kalen. This is not about clemency. This is about enduring. Yours and theirs. And whether you flourish or perish will rest entirely on your candor." The trail snaked skyward, a jagged scar of stone and parched brush clinging to the mountainside's flank. Lyra ascended with focused efficiency, her tread sure even where Kaelin faltered on the treacherous incline. The air grew thin, each breath a raw scrape in their throats, and the sun hammered down with pitiless ferocity. He flagged, she observed, the crimson rot already sapping the strength from his once mighty physique. A pang of guilt, unexpected and sharp, pierced her resolve. "Halt," she ordered, indicating a meager patch of shade offered by a crumbling crag. Kaelin slumped to the ground, his face glistening with perspiration, his lungs laboring. "We're nowhere near," he croaked, defeat lacing his voice. Lyra disregarded his despair, her gaze locked on the distant horizon. "Closer than you imagine. The ruins hum within my blood. I can feel their beckoning." He met her gaze, a spark of fragile hope igniting in his bloodshot eyes. "You trust this intuition?" "I trust my instincts," she corrected, her tone clipped. "A skill you should have honed long ago." The jibe landed, unspoken but palpable between them. She averted her gaze, refusing to acknowledge the shadow of pain that crossed his features. He deserved no less. Or did he? They continued their arduous climb, the terrain becoming increasingly stark. The path vanished entirely, forcing them to clamber over shifting scree and negotiate perilous gullies. As dusk began to bleed across the sky, painting the jagged peaks with hues of arterial red and bruised violet, Lyra stopped short. "Here," she announced, her voice hushed. "This is it." Kaelin scanned their surroundings, his brow furrowed in confusion. He saw only a chaotic tumble of boulders and a wind-swept plateau. "Here? There's nothing here." Oblivious, Lyra approached a seemingly impassable rock wall, her hands outstretched. She traced the contours of the stone, her fingers gliding over almost invisible indentations. Then, with a faint snap, a section of the rock face receded, revealing a tight aperture that plunged into shadow. He gaped, astounded. "How did you?" "The legacy of my ancestors," she replied, pride coloring her voice. "They preferred solitude." Inside, the air tasted cool and damp, saturated with the musty aroma of mildew and age. Lyra ignited a small crystal, its ethereal glow illuminating the cramped passageway. The walls bore carvings of intricate symbols, a language stirring faintly within her memory, gleaned from forgotten tomes in the coven library. "What do they convey?" Kaelin whispered, awe softening his voice. "Echoes," she responded, her attention riveted to the glyphs. "Echoes of what was, warnings of what might be." The tunnel broadened into a series of chambers, each surpassing the last in size. At the heart of the largest stood a formidable stone altar, its surface stained with what resembled dried blood. Scattered around it lay fragments of pottery, corroded weaponry, and decaying scrolls. "This place," Kaelin breathed, his hand instinctively gripping the hilt of his sword. "It feels tainted." Lyra, already absorbed in the scrolls, felt a tremor pass through her fingers. The parchment felt fragile in her grasp, yet she managed to glean scattered phrases. Omens, rites, admonitions. The words swam before her eyes, an incoherent jumble of archaic knowledge. "The crimson rot," she murmured, barely audible. "It originates here, all of it." She unearthed a larger scrap of scroll, its script more legible than the others. It spoke of a blight that would decimate the werewolf clans, a plague fueled by perfidy and sustained by animosity. It spoke of a witch-wolf scion, a hybrid of two worlds, destined to either redeem them or annihilate them all. The prophecy resonated with whispers she had known since childhood. "This confirms it, doesn't it?" Kaelin asked, his voice strained. This is the prophecy that damned me. That damned us both. Lyra offered no response, her gaze fixed on the scroll. Suddenly, a voice reverberated through the chamber, seemingly emanating from everywhere and nowhere at once. The past is a cage, Alpha, and vengeance is its jailer. They both spun around, frantically searching for the source. A figure shrouded in shadows stood before them, barely discernible in the dim light. His face remained concealed, yet his eyes burned with an unsettling brilliance. "Who are you?" Kalen demanded, his grip tightening on his sword. The figure chuckled, a dry, grating sound. "A guide, perhaps. Or a deterrent. The choice hinges on the path you embrace." "What do you mean?" Lyra inquired, her voice cautious. "The prophecy is not immutable," the figure stated, his voice echoing through the stone chamber. "It is a river, ever coursing, ever reshaping. You possess the power to redirect its flow, but heed this warning. The currents of vengeance are treacherous, capable of swallowing you whole." "I don't comprehend," Kalen said. Brown knitted. "You seek an antidote to the rot," the figure continued. "But salvation resides not within these ruins, but within your own hearts. You must sever the cycle of animosity or face utter destruction." "How?" Lyra pressed. "How do we achieve such a feat?" The figure moved closer, his eyes piercing her soul. "Absolution, the solitary path. But absolution is not feebleness. It is resilience. It is the fortitude to select a different course." He pivoted toward Kalen, his gaze unwavering. "You have aggrieved this woman, Alpha. You have inflicted immeasurable suffering. Can you truly expect her beneficence?" Kalen's jaw tensed. He met Lyra's eyes, a desperate plea etched within them. "I understand I am undeserving," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "But I beseech you, my people they are not deserving of death." Lyra stared, her heart pounding against her ribs. The figure's pronouncements reverberated in her mind. Absolution. Could she truly offer it? Could she pardon the pack that had sought her demise? The answer, she realized, held more complexity than she had imagined. It was not about exonerating their transgressions, but about forging a destiny where hate did not dominate them all. It was about rescuing herself just as much as rescuing them. "Relate to me," she commanded, her voice trembling faintly. "Tell me everything. All you know regarding the rot. All you understand concerning the prophecy. Unadulterated honesty. No further secrets." Kalen nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of anticipation and trepidation. "I shall," he affirmed, his voice resolute. "I vow it." The figure offered a chilling smile. "The way is laid out before you, but know that the darkness watches, and it will not let you achieve your goal unhindered." With that, the figure dematerialized, melting into the darkness as silently as he had arrived. Lyra and Kalen remained isolated in the ancient chamber, the weight of the prophecy crushing them, the murmurs of the ancients swirling around them. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, both physical and psychological. Yet, for the first time, Lyra detected a glimmer of hope, a fragile ember in the encompassing gloom. Perhaps, just perhaps, they might shatter the cycle of malice. Perhaps they could discover a means of saving everyone. But initially, Kalen must bear all, and she must determine whether true absolution lay within her grasp. A different light shafts of light lanced through holes in the ceiling of the dilapidated chamber, scattering dust motes across the crumbling stone walls etched with cryptic symbols. Lyra trailed a finger over one, its coarse surface a stark contrast to her skin. The chamber smelled of must and long-dormant enchantments. Opposite her, Kalen, his face drawn and weary, wrestled with the archaic text, brow creased in concentration. The crimson rot throbbed ominously beneath the translucent skin of his forearm, a stark reminder of their desperate mission. Hours, perhaps days, had blurred since the enigmatic figure vanished, leaving them the impossible task of deciphering the prophecy. The enormity of it weighed on Lyra, a leaden feeling in her very bones. This wasn't solely about saving Kalen or his pack. It was a matter of something far more fundamental. A profound chord struck within her soul, the chance to forge a new history, free from the stains of blood and animosity. "It's fractured," Kalen croaked, his voice raw. He glanced up, his usually piercing eyes now murky with fatigue and a hint of dread. The translation, it mentions a singular figure, fated either to shatter the cycle or perpetuate it. Lyra's gaze locked with his, a sudden fire igniting within her. "And?" He hesitated, then whispered, "And it claims the choice hinges upon the one who suffered injustice." The ensuing silence was profound. The prophecy's weight settled heavily upon Lyra. Injustice? That was a gross understatement. He hadn't merely wronged her, he'd decreed her execution. And now, the destiny of his entire pack rested on her decision. The irony stung. She forced her mind to clear, suppressing the bitterness, reminding herself this wasn't about him, not truly. It was about the future, about preventing further carnage fueled by the ancient feud between werewolves and witches. "What more does it reveal?" she asked, her tone surprisingly even. Kalen raked a hand through his already tangled hair. "It mentions a ritual, a blending of bloodlines, a sacrifice of ego." Lyra scoffed. "Sacrifice of ego? Hardly a grand gesture for you, Alpha, is it?" The words slipped out before she could censor them, dripping with a venom she hadn't meant to expose. He winced, his color paling further. "Lyra," he pleaded, his voice hoarse. "I know I don't merit your absolution, but I swear I'd give anything to secure my people's safety. Anything." She averted her eyes, unable to bear his gaze. The naked desperation in his voice was disquieting. She had always envisioned him as a pitiless commander, an apex predator, incapable of such vulnerability. Now, weakened by the plague and his own remorse, he seemed almost mortal. "It's not about you, Kalen," she said, her voice gentler now. "It's about breaking free from this pattern, ending the bloodshed." He nodded, his focus fixed on the flagstones beneath their feet. "I understand, but you have to realize I was young. I was gripped by fear, the old tales they foretold of a sorceress who would bring about the downfall of our pack. So you chose to murder me before I even had the opportunity?" Lyra challenged, her voice rising in pitch. "It was a miscalculation," he conceded, his voice thick with self-reproach. "I sought to safeguard my people. I believed I was acting in their best interests. And now?" He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Now I perceive that the genuine menace wasn't you. It was the dread, the venom that consumed us all. That still does." A protracted silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the scuttling of unseen creatures in the hidden corners of the chamber. Lyra scrutinized his face, searching for any hint of deception, but all she discerned was profound weariness, profound regret, and a desperate plea for redemption. "Tell me about your pack," she inquired, the question catching even herself off guard. He looked taken aback, but complied, his voice tinged with warmth as he described his people. He spoke of the families who depended on him, the children who admired him, the elders who had guided him. He recounted their customs, their aspirations, their anxieties. As he spoke, Lyra began to perceive them not as a faceless horde of werewolves, but as individuals, each with their own lives, their own narratives. He faltered, his voice breaking. "They're dying, Lyra. The rot, it's devouring them. I've already lost so many." She registered the raw anguish etched across his features, the genuine sorrow glimmering in his eyes. For the first time, she saw him not as the antagonist, but as a leader burdened by an impossible responsibility, a leader on the verge of failure. "It's not an easy role, is it?" she said, her voice soft. He shook his head. "It's a torment. To lead is to constantly navigate between disaster and catastrophe, to bear the weight of everyone's expectations and know you'll invariably fall short." He fixed her with a gaze of stark vulnerability. "Do you ever feel that way?" Lyra hesitated, surprised by the question, by the unexpected empathy in his expression. She had always guarded her emotions fiercely, fearful of exposing her weaknesses. But something in his candor, in his shared burden, compelled her to reveal a fraction of herself. "I grew up an orphan," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "Raised by a coven who never wholly embraced me. I was always out of place. Too wolf for the witches, too witch for the wolves. I never truly belonged." She looked away, ashamed of her vulnerability. But Callan did not judge. He simply listened, his gaze unwavering. "I understand," he murmured. "To be stranded between two worlds, it's a solitary existence." His words resonated deeply, a spark of understanding in the enveloping darkness. He understood. Perhaps he wasn't merely a ruthless alpha, blinded by dogma and fear. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was capable of transformation. "The ritual," she said, breaking the silence. "What does it involve?" Callan drew a deep breath, his expression hardening. "It necessitates a blood covenant, a mingling of our bloodlines, a symbolic unification." Lyra felt a jolt of surprise, a fleeting sensation she couldn't readily define. A blood covenant, a unification. The implications were profound. "And the sacrifice of ego?" she inquired, her voice carefully devoid of emotion. He met her eyes, his filled with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. "I must publicly acknowledge my transgressions, to concede that I was wrong to condemn you, wrong to decree your execution. I must implore your forgiveness." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken weight. Implore her forgiveness. After all he had done, after all the pain he had inflicted, he was willing to debase himself before her, before his pack, before the entire world. Lyra looked at him, truly looked at him, in a different light. She saw not merely the alpha, not merely the antagonist, but a man driven to save his people, a man prepared to relinquish his pride, his reputation, perhaps even his life. And in that instant, she recognized that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a possibility for absolution. Not just for him, but for herself. A prospect of shattering the cycle of hatred and constructing a different future. A future where witches and werewolves could coexist, not as enemies, but as allies. But the path to that future was paved with peril, and the choices they faced would be arduous agonizing, and perhaps even unattainable. The prophecy hung over them, a dark and uncertain path leading into the uncharted future. And Lyra knew, with a chilling conviction, that their journey had just commenced. Blood and shadows, the air pressed down, a stifling shroud laced with the reek of rot and sodden earth. Lyra stood beside Kaelin, the impact of his desperate words solidifying in her core like ingested lead. His confession had been a brutal unveiling, a flayed truth offered to her gaze. Within its rawness, she detected a flicker that defied expectation, honest regret. Yet, regret was no eraser. It couldn't mend the scars that pulsed with each heartbeat. He emanated weakness, a palpable aura. The crimson rot was devouring him, an internal erosion. His once imposing physique was now skeletal, his gaze unnaturally bright. He relied on a twisted staff, each inhalation a ragged wheeze. A dry snap echoed from the shadowed wood. Instinct, honed by years of hard survival, shrieked a warning through Lyra's veins. She spun, drawing power from the earth, the very air scintillating with nascent power. "Company," she breathed, her voice a thread. Kaelin straightened, or attempted to, his grip tightening on the staff. "Challengers," he croaked. "They sense vulnerability." Before he could explain, the tree line exploded. A warband of werewolves, their eyes burning with ravenous intent, flooded the clearing. Larger and fiercer than Kaelin's pack, their pelts were the color of midnight, their snarls edged with cruel assurance. "Whoa, whoa," one of them growled, stalking forward. Broad-chested and battle-scarred, his voice was a low, rumbling threat. The mighty Alpha, brought to his knees. And a sorceress, a truly pathetic alliance. "This is sovereign territory," Kaelin managed, his voice strained yet laced with resolve. "Withdraw now, and I might consider your continued existence." The rival Alpha's laugh was a harsh, gravelly sound. "You grant us life? You can barely stand. This land is ours now. As for the witch, she will be taken as a valuable prize." Lyra didn't hesitate. Magic surged through her system, manifesting as a shimmering barrier around them. The initial assault crashed against it, claws spurking harmlessly against the ethereal energy. "I wouldn't be so certain," Lyra responded, her tone glacial. The rival pack surged forward and all hell broke loose. Werewolves attacked with reckless abandon, their teeth bared, claws seeking purchase. Lyra moved with surprising grace, a blur amidst the chaos, her magic unleashed as a torrent of fire and kinetic force. She sent one adversary tumbling with a wave of pure energy, then cauterized the claws of another with pinpoint precision. Despite his failing health, Kaelin fought with savage intensity. He wielded his staff with unexpected force, sending werewolves sprawling, his battle cries ringing through the forest. But he was sluggish, his actions hampered by the insidious disease. Lyra spotted one of the rivals breach his defenses, claws poised to deliver a mortal strike. She lunged, shoving Kaelin aside. The claws slashed across her arm, ripping through leather and flesh. Agony flared, but she suppressed it, channeling her energy into a potent curse. The attacking werewolf seized up, his eyes wide with sheer terror, before collapsing into a violent spasm. "Lyra!" Kaelin shouted, his voice laced with alarm. "I'm intact," she snapped, gritting her teeth against the burning pain. "Attend to the fight." They stood back to back, a tempest of magic and fury against a deluge of teeth and claws. Lyra's sorcery was powerful, but it rapidly drained her. She could feel her inner reserves diminishing, her movements growing leaden. Kalen, too, was weakening, his breath ragged and shallow, his strikes losing their impact. Just as Lyra felt despair creeping in, a fresh roar tore through the atmosphere. Bram and Eamon, followed by a handful of Kalen's remaining pack members, charged into the clearing. They threw themselves into the fray, their loyalty a staunch defense against the overwhelming odds. "We will not witness our alpha fall," Bram bellowed, tackling a rival werewolf with ferocious abandon. Eamon, his expression grim, positioned himself beside Lyra, his eyes narrowed in determination. "We heard the disturbance. What is our role?" "Protect Kalen," Lyra said, her voice strained and thin. "He requires respite." The arrival of backup shifted the momentum. Kalen's loyalists fought with the desperation of the utterly forsaken. They were heavily outnumbered, but they were defending their territory, their alpha, their very existence. The rival pack, caught off guard by the sudden resistance, began to waver. Their initial bravado crumbled, replaced by a seed of doubt. Seeing his advantage dissolve, the rival alpha snarled in frustration. "Retreat!" he bellowed. "We will return when their strength has ebbed." With a final, defiant howl, the rival pack melted back into the shadows, disappearing into the woods. Silence fell over the clearing, punctuated only by the labored breathing of the survivors. Lyra leaned heavily against a tree, her arm throbbing, her body screaming with fatigue. Kalen stood near, his face ashen, his eyes a complex mix of gratitude and shame. "I thank you," he rasped, his voice rough. "You ensured our survival." Lyra offered no response. Her gaze swept over the wounded, the fallen, the utter devastation that scarred the clearing. The endless cycle of violence, the pervasive hatred. It was a contagion that spoiled everything it touched. "This encounter is not the end," she stated, her voice soft yet firm. "They will return. They sense the scent of blood in the water." Kalen nodded gravely. "I know this, but we will ready ourselves in preparation." "Will you truly be prepared?" Lyra questioned, turning to confront him directly. "Or will this unending cycle of retribution consume you all, eventually?" He met her gaze, his expression unreadable, his eyes searching. "What is it that you demand of me, Lyra?" "I demand you break the cycle," she declared, her voice resolute. "I demand you choose absolution over vengeance. I demand you become the alpha your pack needs and deserves." He recoiled, as if struck. "That is an impossible undertaking," he whispered. "Is it truly impossible?" Lyra countered, her eyes unwavering. "Or are you merely too fearful to make an attempt?" She pivoted away, leaving him isolated in the blood-soaked clearing, the weight of her accusations hanging palpably in the air. The prophecy, the ritual, the decision ultimately rested with her, but its ramifications would be his to bear. And in that instant, Lyra knew that the destiny of Kalen's pack, perhaps even her own, teetered precariously on the edge of a choice she was uncertain she could execute. Seeds of forgiveness. The air reeked of iron and spilled blood, a gruesome tableau overlaid with the sharp sting of terror and aggression. Ignoring the fire in her flank, Lyra stayed kneeling beside the downed werewolf. Her tunic was saturated with her own slowly welling blood, but the wolf's plight demanded immediate attention. A ghastly rash of crimson rot blossomed across his pelt, the infection having already stolen the light from his eyes. A whimper escaped him, a sound that resonated with long-dormant feelings within Lyra. "Easy," she rasped, hovering her hands over the wound. A surge of power, manifested as a cool, verdant light, streamed from her fingertips, banishing the diseased crimson. He twitched, then relaxed, his rasping breaths evening out. Across the blood-soaked clearing, Kalen, diminished but unbowed, savaged a challenger's throat. His movements were sluggish, evidence of the rot's insidious work, but his eyes blazed with fierce protectiveness. He fought not just for his pack, but for a reason Lyra couldn't name. A bellow ripped from his chest, shaking the very trees, and a fresh attacker faltered, fear clouding his gaze. At the forest's edge, a young pup lay trembling. Isla, Bram had called her. The crimson rot had sunk its claws in with ruthless speed, contorting her small frame with tremors. A pang, unwelcome and sharp, struck Lyra. This was not about retribution, it was about senseless suffering. Ignoring the jarring pain in her side, she moved towards the pup. "Lyra, don't!" Kalen's voice was a strangled roar, thick with pain and warning. "They'll use her against you." She pressed onward. Kneeling beside Isla, she saw only pure terror reflected in the pup's wide amber eyes. "It's She soothed heckedly tender. "I'm here to help." This healing proved harder, the rot deeply embedded. Lyra channeled all her energy into the pup, sweat stinging her eyes. The emerald light throbbed, locked in a fierce battle with the parasitic crimson. A brute of a rogue werewolf erupted from the shadows, malice burning in his gaze, and swung a heavy blow at Lyra's vulnerable back. A blow meant to crush bone. Time seemed to stretch. A grim resignation settled over Lyra as she braced for the impact. Perhaps this was the end, dying to save one she should despise. But the blow never connected. With a thunderous roar, Kalen intercepted the attacker, slamming him back with bone-jarring force. He loomed over Lyra, a protective wall, his eyes burning with fierce conviction. "Touch her," he growled, his voice a primal threat, "and I will end you." The rogue hesitated, torn between hatred and fear. He saw the unwavering resolve in Kalen's eyes, the untamed power that still surged within him, and retreated into the darkness. Kalen swayed, his breath ragged. He turned to Lyra, his gaze a strange tapestry of shame and gratitude. "Why?" he croaked, his voice a bare whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Lyra met his eyes, and for the first time, she glimpsed something beyond the alpha, beyond the warrior, beyond the man who had condemned her. A flicker of regret, a spark of humanity. "Because," she said quietly, "someone has to stop the cycle." She looked down at Isla, whose breathing was now deep and even. The crimson rot was fading, the emerald light slowly but steadily gaining ground. Drained and hollowed by the effort, Lyra felt her life force depleted. Yet, watching Isla's chest rise and fall, the color returning to her small face, something within her shifted. Violence still raged around them, the air thick with its sounds. But in their small circle, a fragile truce had taken hold. Kalen stood sentinel, his eyes vigilant, guarding her as she healed his pack. A desperate alliance, perhaps, but an alliance all the same. "They won't quit," Kalen said, his voice low and gravelly. "Not until one of us is gone. Then we'll face them together," Lyra replied, her voice steady. Meeting his gaze, she saw a flash of surprise, a sliver of hope. He nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of their pact. He knew, as she did, that this was simply the opening skirmish. The path ahead would be fraught with peril. Yet for the first time in a long time, Lyra felt the faintest stirrings of something akin to hope. The seeds of forgiveness, buried beneath layers of hatred and pain, had begun to take root. Bram approached tentatively, relief flooding his face as he looked at Isla. "She'll be all right?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "She'll live," Lyra said, a weary smile touching her lips. "But she needs rest." Bram nodded, gently gathering the pup into his arms. He looked at Lyra, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick. "I don't understand why you're doing this, but thank you." Lyra simply nodded, turning back to Kaelin. He remained fixed on her, his gaze intense and inscrutable. "You're hurt," he observed, his voice gruff. "Let me. I'll see to it." Lyra cut him off. She wasn't ready to accept his help, not yet. She needed time to process the events, to navigate the evolving landscape of her own heart. Sensing their advantage lost, the rival pack began to melt back into the shadows from which they had emerged. Kaelin tracked their retreat, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowed. He knew they would return, relentless in their pursuit of his territory, his pack, his life. But for now, they were gone. And in their wake, a fragile calm descended upon the clearing. The injured received care, the dead were mourned. Lyra and Kaelin stood side by side, improbable allies united by circumstance, their destinies intertwined. As the first tendrils of dawn snaked through the trees, painting the sky with strokes of gold and crimson, Lyra knew the true battle was only just beginning. A battle not against the rival pack, but against the darkness within. A battle for forgiveness, for redemption, for a future unshackled by the past. Though the weight of prophecy still bore down on her, she knew, with a certainty that astonished her, that she possessed the power to reshape it. The choice was hers, and she would choose hope. The witch's game, the mingled scents of wet soil and sharp ozone, wrestled with the medicinal tang of Lyra's elixirs. Isla, at last calmed by slumber, rested on a bed cobbled together from furs, her frail frame marked by the steady rhythm of breath. By the cavern's mouth, Kaelin stood sentinel, his figure a stark silhouette promising retribution against the waning light. Lyra felt the weight of his unspoken questions. Turning towards Morwen, she saw the coven leader's features rendered cryptic by the dancing torchlight. "This isn't natural, is it?" Lyra breathed. Morwen's gaze, steeped in ageless wisdom, found hers. "The crimson rotted carries the stain of black sorcery, child, a vile corruption of the natural order." From within the folds of her ample robes, she produced a small, elaborately carved box crafted of wood. Within lay a clutch of withered herbs, their vibrancy stolen. These were culled from a fallen wolf, the lingering essence it screams of Rowan. The name dropped like a stone into a still pond, sending ripples of unease. Rowan, a sorceress of formidable skill, driven by an insatiable hunger for dominion. Lyra had tasted the bitter edge of her ambition before, a viper's kiss. "Rowan?" Kaelin's voice emerged as a deep rumble, astonishment coloring the tone. "Why would she assault my people?" "Not solely your people, Kaelin," Lyra countered, her tone gaining resolve. "All the kindreds. Her aim is to cripple them, to force them into submission. Then she shall extend a hand, but at a terrible cost," Morwen affirmed with a solemn nod. "Supremacy is her desire, a new epoch where witches dictate terms and werewolves serve as mere instruments. The crimson rot represents the opening move in her grand scheme." memories flickered through Lyra's mind. Muted rumors of Rowan's swelling sway, her efforts to bend covens and manipulate treaties. She'd dismissed them as typical power struggles, the habitual jockeying for prominence among witches. But this resonated with malevolence. This constituted an act of open hostility. How can we be certain? Kaelin pressed, a thread of skepticism weaving through his words. A warrior at heart, he was not prone to trustful acceptance of witchly plots. Morwen extended the defiled herbs. The signature is unmistakable. Rowan's preference is blood magic, warping the wellspring of life into a weapon of destruction. This rotted embodies her cruelly wrought masterpiece. A tidal wave of fury surged through Lyra, scolding and urgent. Rowan had not only released a lethal affliction, but she had also perverted the essence of magic itself, the force designed to mend and shield. She envisioned Isla, her delicate constitution weakened by the disease, and her determination solidified. "We must find her," Lyra declared, her voice ringing with firmness. "Halt her before this blight spreads further." Kaelin shifted to face her, his countenance an inscrutable study. "And how, pray tell, would you accomplish that?" "Rowan is formidable, fortified by her coven and the strength of her own dark arts. I possess certain advantages," Lyra replied, meeting his intense gaze. "And I possess something she covets." Her fingers brushed against the amulet concealed beneath her blouse, the legacy passed down through generations, the prize Rowan had sought to steal years before. "What is it?" Kaelin probed, suspicion still flickering like wildfire. "A bargaining piece," Lyra answered, a ghost of a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Or perhaps a weapon in disguise. The ensuing hours dissolved into a frenzy of purpose. Lyra delved into consultations with Morwen, charting ancient texts and maps, hunting for clues to Rowan's location. Meanwhile, Kaelin summoned his warriors, bracing them for a collision that might determine the destiny of their pack. Tension permeated the atmosphere, a volatile blend of dread and unwavering resolve. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, Lyra stood before Kaelin, her face bearing a pallor of exhaustion yet her spirit unbound. "I have discovered her whereabouts," she revealed. "An abandoned bastion, nestled deep within the Shadowwood, a nexus of oppressive energy, perfectly suited to her dark rituals." "The Shadowwood," Kaelin echoed, his brow creasing with concern. "That place is cursed. No one ventures there willingly." "Rowan thrives on blight," Lyra stated flatly. "It fuels her power." Her eyes implored him. "We must act swiftly. Each moment of delay condemns more wolves to death." Kaelin paused, then gave a curt nod. "So be it. We depart with haste. But heed my words, Lyra. If this proves a snare ray, it is not," Lyra responded, her voice unwavering. "But it will be perilous. Rowan will anticipate our approach." As their departure neared, Morwen approached Lyra, her face etched with worry. "Take care, child," she cautioned, her voice soft. "Never underestimate Rowan. She will employ every deception, every weapon within her grasp to vanquish you." "I am aware," Lyra answered, "but I am not the innocent she once knew. I have learned a few enchantments myself." She glanced at Kaelin, who stood poised, his eyes reflecting a battle between apprehension and fixed determination. Their alliance remained delicate, hewn from desperation and necessity. However, as they prepared to confront the looming darkness, Lyra found herself unable to ignore the sensation that far more than the mere survival of the pack hung in the balance. This ordeal served as a trial of their own inner demons, an opportunity to shatter the cycle of animosity and vengeance that had long haunted their steps. As they rode towards the Shadowwood, the trees clawing at them like grasping talons, Lyra could not suppress a prickle of dread. The air hung thick with the acrid stench of decay, and the only sound came from the rustle of unseen creatures. This marked Rowan's kingdom, a realm where shadows held sway, and Lyra understood that to truly defeat her, they had to confront not only Rowan's potent magic, but also the shadows that lurked within their own hearts, breaking the curse the air in Dar. Rowan's lair, thick with metallic tang and the reek of rot, telegraphed the impending clash. Python-thick roots, faintly luminescent with a bilious green glow, snaked across the cavern floor. Rowan, oblivious, stood before a seething cauldron, her back a steady in tense anticipation as she chanted words that grated against Lyra's very being. Kaelin's grip on her arm tightened, a soundless question echoing their shared apprehension. "She knows we're here," Lyra breathed, her voice lost against the cauldron's gurgling drone. The amulet at her throat hammered against her skin, a frantic signal, a beacon in the gloom that surely snared Rowan's gaze. Rowan pivoted, eyes glittering with dark amusement. "Lyra, Kaelin, how predictable." Her lips stretched into a cruel parody of a smile. "Did you truly imagine you could thwart me? That your pathetic coalition could unravel what I have so painstakingly wrought?" Kaelin advanced, a barely suppressed storm brewing within his stance. "It ends tonight, Rowan. The crimson rot will be excised, and with it, your tyrannical reign." Rowan's laugh, a brittle shard of sound, echoed off the cavern walls. "Brave pronouncements, Alpha. But you exude fear. You sense what I am capable of." With a flourish, she gestured to the cauldron, and the simmering contents surged crimson. "This is power, Kaelin. Power beyond your comprehension. Power destined to reshape this world." The magic in the air congealed, becoming almost palpable, a stifling blanket that pressed against Lyra. Briar's counsel surfaced. "Control. Focus. Let the magic channel through you, not devour you." She closed her eyes, finding her center, tapping into the wellspring within. Opening them, her gaze was resolute, unflinching. "Your power is bought with innocence, Rowan." "That's not power. It's degradation." The smile vanished, replaced by a snarl contorting Rowan's features. Sentimental drivel. "You are a fool, Lyra, a mirror of your mother." The casual brutality of the statement landed like a physical blow, a tsunami of grief and fury threatening to breach Lyra's carefully constructed defenses. Kaelin snarled, shielding her with his body. "Keep her mother's name out of your poisonous mouth." Rowan dismissed him, her attention laser-focused on Lyra. She was weak, as are you. Lyra surged past Kaelin, her gaze locked on Rowan's. "You know nothing of my mother. Or me." Raising her hands, she channeled the amulet's potent energy. "This ends now, Rowan." The battle detonated in a kaleidoscope of light and a deafening roar. Rowan unleashed a barrage of umbral energy, bolts of black lightning that tore through the air, leaving trails of ozone-laced smoke. Kaelin shifted, his werewolf form a whirling tempest of fur and fangs, intercepting the assault with savage grace. Lyra retaliated with shields of iridescent light, deflecting the darkest incantations, weaving her own spell strands of pure energy that lashed out, seeking Rowan. The cavern shuddered under the weight of their combined might. Roots thrashed, the cauldron foamed with unrestrained fury, and the air buzzed with untamed energy. Strain etched itself onto Lyra's face. Her muscles screamed in protest. Her mind teetered on the edge of exhaustion. Rowan's strength was formidable, exceeding all expectations. Her magic felt ancient, steeped in shadow, fed by an inexhaustible reservoir of spite. Kalen, despite his raw power, struggled to close the distance. Rowan's spells erected barriers of thorny vines and summoned phantasmal beasts, all fangs and shadows, that harried him relentlessly. He roared in frustration, rending the obstacles only to see them instantaneously regenerate. Spotting an opening, Lyra channeled a concentrated surge of energy, targeting the cauldron. The blast struck true, shattering the vessel and showering the cavern floor with its crimson contents. The effect was immediate. The roots recoiled, the shadowy beasts faded into nothing, and Rowan stumbled back, clutching at her chest. "No!" she shrieked, her voice a raw, fractured sound of despair. "You fools! You cannot possibly grasp what you've unleashed." Lyra understood that destroying the cauldron offered only a temporary reprieve. The crimson rot wasn't simply contained within the liquid, it was woven into the very essence of Shadowwood, a curse permeating the land and its inhabitants. To truly eradicate it, they needed to strike at its nexus, at the core of Rowan's power. Her gaze met Kalen's, a silent accord passing between them. They had to unite, to meld their strengths, to focus their energies into a single, piercing point. Kalen nodded, reverting to his human form. He approached Lyra, his gaze unwavering. "What do we do?" Taking a deep breath, Lyra centered herself on the amulet's warmth. It pulsed, guiding her, illuminating the path. "We have to weave a countercurse," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound conviction. A torrent of restorative energy to sweep through Shadowwood, purging it of the rot. She knew it was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but their only option. "It will require all our power," Kalen cautioned, his brow furrowed with concern. "Leaving us vulnerable." Lyra met his gaze. "We have no other choice." She reached out, interlacing her fingers with his. A jolt of energy surged between them, a spark igniting, transcending their past animosity. For the first time, she saw not the alpha who had betrayed her, but a man willing to sacrifice everything to save his people. Rowan, recovering from the cauldron's destruction, watched them, her fury mounting. "You imagine you can defeat me with your pathetic alliance?" she hissed. "You are lost in delusion." Raising her hands once more, she prepared to unleash another wave of dark magic, but Lyra and Kalen were ready. They stood shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, channeling their power, focusing their will. Lyra closed her eyes, extending her senses, feeling the magical current within her, the dormant power of her lineage. She felt Kalen's presence beside her, the feral, untamed energy of the werewolf, anchoring her, grounding her. Together, they became a conduit, a vessel for the healing surge they were about to unleash. Their voices rose in unison, weaving a potent incantation that resonated through the cavern. The amulet blazed with incandescent light, and a wave of pure energy radiated outwards, rippling through the space. The light engulfed the cavern, banishing the shadows from every crevice, cleansing the atmosphere. The roots recoiled further, their sickly green pallor fading to a lifeless gray. Rowan shrieked, clutching at her head, her body convulsing in agony as the dark magic binding her began to dissipate, dissolving like smoke on the wind. The wave of energy surged beyond the cavern walls, cascading out into the Shadowwood. Lyra felt it a profound sense of purification, erasing the darkness, revitalizing the land. She sensed the trees sighing in relief, the creatures of the forest stirring from their enchanted slumber, the very earth breathing anew. The crimson rot was receding, its grip on Shadowwood loosening with each passing second. It was working. They were breaking the curse. But the effort was proving devastating. Lyra felt her strength ebbing, her muscles trembling uncontrollably, her mind struggling to maintain the vital focus. Kalen, too, was faltering, his face ashen, his breath ragged. They were pushing themselves beyond their limits, tapping into their last reserves of energy. Rowan, weakened but far from vanquished, seized her opportunity. With a final, desperate surge of dark magic, she launched a bolt of malevolent energy at Lyra, intending to sever her link to the amulet, to shatter the flow of healing. Kalen saw it coming and, without a moment's hesitation, hurled himself in front of Lyra, absorbing the full brunt of the blast. He cried out in anguish, collapsing, his body seized by violent tremors. Lyra gasped, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Kalen!" She rushed to his side, cradling his head in her lap. His eyes were shut tight, his face a mask of agony. "No," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, no, no." Rowan, witnessing Kalen's fall, unleashed a triumphant cackle. "Fool, you sacrificed yourself for her? You are even more pathetic than I believed." But Lyra was deaf to her taunts. She poured all her remaining energy into Kalen, desperately attempting to mend his wounds. She felt his life force flickering, fading, and realized that if she didn't act swiftly, he would perish. "Magic isn't merely about spells and incantations, Lyra," Briar's voice echoed in her memory. "It's about connection. It's about empathy. It's about perceiving the ebb and flow of life and redirecting it where it is most needed." Closing her eyes, Lyra reached out to Kalen with her mind, sensing his essence, feeling the air tasted acrid, a blend of ozone and scorched soil, Rowan's legacy. Lyra cradled Kalen, her fingertips ghosting over the jagged scar of dark energy bisecting his chest. His breaths came in ragged gasps, each a monumental effort. The amulet in her grasp thrummed faintly, a delicate counterpoint to the encroaching abyss threatening to swallow him whole. "Kalen," she breathed, her voice raspy with fatigue and dread. "Hold on." His eyes, glazed with suffering, flickered open, a wan smile gracing his lips. "Lyra, they're safe. Don't exert yourself," she urged, pressing harder against the wound, channeling every fiber of her being, every last reserve of power. "Conserve your strength." Morwen materialized beside them, concern creasing her features. "Lyra, you're depleting yourself. The rot's been vanquished, the pack secured, but Kalen, his injury runs deep, saturated with malevolent magic. I can lessen his torment, yet." Her voice faltered, the unspoken, truth hanging heavy. Lyra refused the unspoken verdict, her eyes glued to Kalen's face. "No? There must be a solution." She closed her eyes, extending her senses, searching for the echoes of their intertwined essence from when she'd rerouted his life force. It lingered, fragile but unbroken, a silver filament binding them. "The tether," she murmured, barely audible. "I can still perceive it, but it's unraveling." She marshaled her resolve, pouring energy into that thread, striving to reinforce it, to rekindle the ember of his vitality. The amulet blazed, enveloping them in a comforting radiance. Kalen choked, a grimace contorting his face. "Lyra, don't waste yourself on me." His voice was a bare thread of sound. "I'm not worthy." Her eyes shot open, fixing him with a searing gaze. "Don't speak like that." The words were abrupt, infused with desperate insistence. You defended them. Your pack. You sheltered me. You deserve to survive." Bram approached, his face etched with relief. "Lyra Isla, she'll recover. We're in your debt." Lyra mustered a fragile smile. "She possesses resilience. They all do." She returned her attention to Kaelin, her expression resolute. "I refuse to let you succumb, Kaelin. Not after all of this." Hours dissolved into a relentless battle. Lyra transfused her magic into Kaelin, repelling the encroaching shadows, combating the insidious poison threatening to extinguish his flame. Dawn began to break, painting the sky in strokes of rose and gold, a harbinger of renewal. As the first sunbeams caressed his face, Kaelin shifted. His eyelids fluttered, and a spark of recognition ignited in his eyes as he gazed at Lyra. "Lyra," he croaked, his voice regaining strength, yet still edged with suffering. "What? What transpired?" "You nearly perished," she replied, her voice tremulous with relief. "But you're alive. You will heal." He reached, his hand seeking hers, his grip feeble but firm. I recall Rowan, the Rata," he faltered, his brow knitting together. "I remember everything." He regarded her, his gaze laden with profound sorrow, deep and abiding regret. "Lyra, I am truly sorry for all I have done, for all I subjected you to. I trusted the prophecies. I allowed fear to warp my judgment. I almost destroyed you and nearly obliterated us all." His words hung in the balance, heavy with the burden of his past sins. Lyra met his gaze, her heart a tempest of conflicting emotions, resentment, pain, betrayal. Yet something more stirred within her, a hint of comprehension, a flicker of absolution. She had come thirsting for vengeance, driven by the anguish of her past. Yet she had witnessed the devastation wrought by the rot, the terror in the pack's eyes, Kaelin's desperate struggle to safeguard them. She had witnessed his selflessness, his willingness to offer his life for hers. The prophecy had foretold calamity, of a witch who would doom the werewolves. But prophecies were not immutable laws, carved in stone. They were warnings, probabilities, paths that could be diverted, choices that could be enacted. She saw Kaelin, prostrate and vulnerable before her, remorse etching every line of his face. She could embrace retribution. She could watch him suffer, allow him to die. But what would that accomplish? Would it soothe her torment? Would it grant her serenity? Or would it merely perpetuate the cycle of animosity and violence that had haunted their lineages for generations? She drew a deep breath, her grip tightening around his hand. "I know," she said softly. "I know what you did. But you attempted to rectify it. You fought for your pack. You saved me." His eyes widened with disbelief. "But I tried to murder you, and then you pleaded for my aid," she retorted, a subtle smile gracing her lips. "We all err, Kaelin. What matters is our subsequent actions, how we choose to proceed." A hush descended, broken only by the gentle sounds of the awakening forest. The weight of history lingered, but there was also an intimation of possibilities, a nascent hope for the future. Later, Lyra stood beside Kaelin atop a small knoll overlooking the pack's territory. The werewolves were slowly returning to their lives, their faces reflecting a newfound tranquility and appreciation. Sage approached them, her expression radiating warmth. "They're hailing you as a savior, Lyra." "Both of you." Lyra demurred, I simply responded as needed. Kalen turned to Lyra, his gaze earnest. The pack is eternally in your debt. Then forgo repayment, Lyra said, pivoting to face him. Instead, let's prioritize building a future where debts are unnecessary. Where witches and werewolves can coexist in harmony. Kalen nodded, his gaze unwavering. I second that. I intend to establish a council, a forum where representatives from both our communities can assemble to address concerns, to discover common ground. Lyra smiled. It's a sound start, but it will necessitate more than just a council. It will demand confidence, empathy, and a readiness to pardon the transgressions of the past. I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary, Kalen said, his voice imbued with conviction. I realize I have much to atone for. Lyra reached out, her hand gently cupping his cheek. We all do, yet we need not face it alone. He met her gaze, his eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and wariness. What about us, Lyra? Can you ever truly forgive me? Lyra surveyed the packlands, the werewolves rebuilding their shattered lives, the forest slowly recuperating from the rot's affliction. She reflected on her own past, the sorrow and deprivation she had experienced, the rancor that had possessed her for so long. She closed her eyes, inhaling out deeply, then turned back to Kalen, her gaze imbued with a newfound serenity. I cannot foresee our future, Kalen. But I am certain that I must not permit the past to define us. I can't allow animosity and vengeance to dictate my life any longer. She paused, her voice gentling. I absolve you, Kalen, not only for your actions against me, but for everything. For the suffering, for the treachery, for the fear. I release you. A wave of relief washed across Kalen's face, his expression softening. He reached for her, enfolding her hand in his fingers intertwining with hers. Thank you, Lyra. Thank you for granting me a second chance. They stood together, overlooking the packlands, the setting sun casting a vibrant tableau of colors across the sky. The future remained uncertain, the road ahead fraught with obstacles. Yet they were united, bound by a shared objective, connected by a love that had been forged in hardship and tempered by absolution. The prophecy had warned of annihilation, but it also hinted at the possibility of a renaissance. A dawn where witches and werewolves could stand shoulder to shoulder, not as enemies, but as allies, as confidants, as something more profound. As the last vestiges of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Lyra nestled closer to Kalen, resting her head against his shoulder. His arm tightened around her, a silent vow of protection, of unwavering loyalty, of love. The air was cool, invigorating, carrying the fragrance of pine and the promise of imminent rain. The packlands stretched before them, a mosaic of shadows and light. The future was a blank canvas, yet for the first time in a long time, Lyra sensed a glimmer of optimism, a hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could shatter the cycle of malice and construct a better world. A world where forgiveness triumphs over vengeance, where love conquers fear, and where witches and werewolves could finally discover peace. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the echoes of bygone days, but also the herald of a new dawn.